Excuse me for my voice, but I have never seen anything like it.
You believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable.
Welcome to the Thursday edition of the show. Thanks for tuning in. I know there's a lot of options for you out there. Thanks for checking us out. Get smart, people. We have Alexander Haynes on talking to us about Democratic primaries, who's going to win, who's going to lose, Super Tuesday, what we can expect from Bernie Sanders, Amy Klobuchar, Elizabeth Warren, and how much longer is Bloomberg and Biden going to hang around. Also, coronavirus update. Listen, this is a serious pandemic at this point. He's going to tell you what you need to do, all the information, and more. So, Alexander, right now. All right, on the phone line right now, we have Alexander Haynes, our resident news reporter. Alexander, it has been a busy couple of weeks since the last time we talked to you.
Yeah, it's been a really busy couple of weeks. A lot has happened leading up to Super Tuesday next Tuesday for the Democratic primary. A lot has changed with the coronavirus in those 2 weeks. It's been an incredible 2 weeks of news, pretty much nonstop.
Nonstop. It always is moving. So let's talk about the Democratic debate, because that was kind of what we had on the platter before we had this coronavirus update. So we're going to do coronavirus towards the end of the podcast. We're going to do the Democratic debate right now. The last time we talked, I think we both had an idea that Bernie had a little bit of a momentum deal going. I thought inertia might take him. Nobody, I think, had an idea that it was going to go this far, this quickly for Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, definitely. He has really stolen the show of the Democratic primary right now. He has energized a very young voter base. And that's a voter base that hasn't always turned out in elections and in primaries. It's very hard to get that. Historically, it's very hard to get that voter base of the young voters out in the Democratic primary. So that's what's really boosting Bernie Sanders right now. And he is this is pretty much his to lose right now. The Democratic primary, if it were to end today, would probably be in Bernie Sanders' favor, barring any big upset right now. I really see him running away with this after Super Tuesday. He's leading in some states that I did not expect him to lead. Right now, we have South Carolina on February 29th later this week. Right now, it looks like Biden, out of all people, is actually suspected to win South Carolina. But then again, polls will change very rapidly. There will be last minute. We have 3 days till that primary, so there's going to be last minute campaign pushes throughout that region in South Carolina. It's going to be very interesting. I'm particularly interested in how Elizabeth Warren does, because I feel like it's very much her time to either shine or her time to really kind of take the back burner, even to Mike Bloomberg. There's going to be real discrepancy there. Mike Bloomberg, of course, he's been very shaky in debates. From the little bit that I did watch, I thought he did okay in the debate. But people do not like Mike Bloomberg at all, and every comment he gives is heavily scrutinized. He might be the most scrutinized candidate on the stage at this point.
We've talked about this before, about Mike Bloomberg, how he is essentially running as the Democratic Donald Trump to almost a platform of who wants this. You know, it doesn't make a ton of sense, his campaigning. It doesn't make a ton of sense, his candidacy. But at the same time, he is by far and away the candidate that has spent the most amount of money this election cycle so far, just on advertising.
Oh, yeah, he's blown everybody out of the water already. And he joined in late January was when he joined. And a lot of these people, Biden has been campaigning since almost April of 2019. So over almost a full year now, a lot of these candidates have been pushing. And Mike Bloomberg has joined and already blown them out of the water with his own money.
What do we expect coming out of this, like, Super Tuesday? Because of everybody that is still in the race, it feels like Bloomberg is going to be the one that's going to stick around even after Super Tuesday, and it feels like Bernie is the predominant favorite. I think that he will be one of the last to drop out.
Yeah, so I think a lot of Super Tuesday and who stays in Super Tuesday is going to depend on, well, of course, Super Tuesday, but also on how South Carolina goes. Because if Biden right now is sliding in a lot of polls across the country. However, he has had a last minute, and I'm looking at 538 polls. That's the main polls that I use to forecast these primary elections. And Biden right now he has a steady pickup in South Carolina, which could give him a few delegates, even if he performs poorly on Super Tuesday. It could be enough to keep him in the race for the long term. We've known for a long time this is Biden. He has felt like this is his presidency to win. He's tied himself to Obama repeatedly. He's really pushed this return to normalcy campaign, kind of return to the way things were during Obama's presidency. He's in it for the long term. I think Bernie Sanders, however, is definitely going to run away with Super Tuesday. Elizabeth Warren is very interesting because she's the one that's going to definitely play with Bernie Sanders the most, because a lot of their ideology is very, very similar if you listen to them on the stage. And she made a very good point that did well with a lot of voters. She is very much the idea lady of this Democratic primary. And so while Bernie Sanders has a lot to say, Elizabeth Warren has a lot of the ideas. Whether you agree with them or not is a different matter, but she has all these different ideas that she wants to push, and all these really articulate plans that she wants to put forward. However, if you go back a few months, one of the very interesting things that might be really hurting Elizabeth Warren right now is that she has a huge staff. There are a couple hundred staffers on her campaign, and that's because she decided to put a lot of overhead early and staffers instead of saving money towards the end of the campaign, where a lot of the traditional way to go with these campaigns, and what Bernie Sanders has done is he's actually laid staff off throughout. He did this thing in October, November, I believe, where he raised to kind of practice what he preaches. He put all of his staffers at $15 an hour. And because of that, he actually had to lay a few off. And it's also because what a lot of candidates do typically is they will start to move away from so much staff at a certain point, and they will save up money for ads at the end of the campaign. So right now, there are a lot of Bernie Sanders ads. There are a lot of Mike Bloomberg ads. There are a lot of Joe Biden ads. There are not so many Elizabeth Warren ads because a lot of the money she has raised is going towards huge staff and overhead cost right now. And that might be hurting Elizabeth Warren going into Super Tuesday, as really her ads are these debates. And not everybody watches these debates. Not everybody is on Twitter following the debates minute to minute if they're not watching it. So there are a lot of people who are not going to pick up. They're just going to pick up on one or two headlines of what Elizabeth Warren says. And right now, Bernie Sanders has very smart comebacks to Elizabeth Warren, even if he's not articulating all the ideas. And that has really grabbed the media attention. So he's really stolen what Elizabeth Warren is trying to use as her ad platform.
What do we expect from Pete Buttigieg and Klobuchar coming into this last leg of the race?
Yeah, so Amy Klobuchar was, when we last talked, she had just won. She did not win New Hampshire, but she got very close to winning. It was a very shocking and really late momentum. Right now, she is very much, I have a feeling she will probably drop out, not after Super Tuesday. I don't think anybody's going to drop. Maybe Steyer will drop out after Super Tuesday, and Tulsi Gabbard is actually still trying to push her way through. They may drop out after Super Tuesday. But actually, right now, Steyer's beating Klobuchar 14.6 to 3.6 in preferential polls in South Carolina, which is pretty stunning. Klobuchar, one thing that she did is she had a big last moment of momentum in New Hampshire that she has not been able to net in any other state. We saw her try to do that in Nevada, and it just didn't work. Everybody at that point had really decided who they wanted to vote for. And that's kind of the important thing going forward, is that this is one of the most divided primaries in a very, very long time, where everybody has really decided they want either this candidate or this candidate, and they're very, very adamant about it. Very vitriolic about it too. So a lot of people, as they go forward, as they see Super Tuesday, as they see South Carolina results, they're very much going to choose a candidate. And I'm not expecting a lot of last minute surprises in this primary. So I would put more faith in polls as we go forward in these primaries, especially as we get closer to Super Tuesday. What's in the polls should actually reflect what happens. So I don't see any big surprises for Klobuchar. Now, if we get to Pete Buttigieg, I have a feeling if everybody remembers in the Republican primaries in 2016, John Kasich, he didn't have a strong base, but he had just enough base and just enough media momentum and just enough interesting things to say that he actually stuck around for a very, very long time. And you can make the argument that he actually stole, that Ted Cruz at the very end was gaining momentum, but John Kasich was kind of splitting Ted Cruz's base, and that if John Kasich had dropped out, the primary nomination would have gone to Ted Cruz instead of Donald Trump. I have a feeling Pete Buttigieg may kind of play that same role in the end here. He's backed by a lot of very wealthy people, so he has a little bit more money to fight in this longer than other people. He's not going to really gain in the poll, and he's probably going to poll lower than other people, but if he can get ahead of Warren and if he can stay, he's a little bit in the Mike Bloomberg range, and that just shows how unpopular Mike Bloomberg is. But if he can just steadily sit there, he may be in here for the long haul because even if he's the former mayor of South Bend, Indiana, even if he doesn't win the nomination and if he doesn't continue on to be president, he's going to have a very populist presidential career. So this is really setting up the rest of his career. He does not want to be an irrelevant person dropping out after Super Tuesday. He wants to be the last person dropping out. I see Pete Buttigieg very much, even if it's at his own financial detriment towards the end, I see him sticking around for a very long time.
So the thing the media has really jumped on Bernie for recently is the ideas, but I can see this coming up in the next couple weeks, so I want to get ahead of it. Bernie Bros on social media. Bernie Sanders has one of the most, I think, toxic bases on social media. Do you see that hindering his electability going forward?
I do see it, and that's one of the things that is very divided. And Bernie Sanders, he actually made the statement. It's actually in Washington to reporter Brandy Cruz. She asked him about this toxic fan base, and he made the accusation that it was Russian bots that were acting as his fans to try to cause division in the Democratic primary and to basically lead people to vote for Donald Trump. Intelligence actually looked into this, and I forget if it was today or yesterday. They actually came out with a report, and there is no sign that Russian bots are behind Bernie Sanders' vitriolic fans. And it's very true that he has one of the most vitriolic, if not the most vitriolic base out there. I do see that hurting his ability to be electable. I see a lot of the people who like a Biden or a Bloomberg sticking with a Biden or a Bloomberg instead of going over to Bernie Sanders. One of the other things that I see happening is a lot of people who like Warren are not going to shift over to Sanders because of that. If Warren ends up dropping out here soon, I see them actually going over to Biden or Pete Buttigieg in the long haul. And that's one thing that can actually end up helping Pete Buttigieg is if that division really continues, more people may not want to go over to Sanders, and they may want to go over to Buttigieg and Biden right now just because he does not have that appeal. And because Warren and Sanders have some of the youngest and Biden has some of the oldest supporters, I don't see a lot of young people being attracted to Biden or Bloomberg at this point. So I see a lot of people shifting over to Buttigieg instead of Sanders if Warren were to drop out sooner than later.
Let's make some predictions for Tuesday. We both, I think, agree Bernie's probably going to be the winner, but what are some other winners and losers you can expect coming into Wednesday morning?
Yeah, so going into Wednesday morning, I have the feeling that, like you said, I agree Sanders is the winner. I think Klobuchar will end up probably as the biggest loser, kind of the biggest disappointment. I know there's some excitement around her, but I have a feeling she will disappoint the most. Bloomberg may be the biggest winner out of this. We may see a lot of people end up coming out of Super Tuesday if there is the one thing I know, I made the prediction that the polls are going to end up showing they're going to reflect what's going to actually happen. Bloomberg may be the one caveat to that. We may see a small jump for Bloomberg because remember, he is very unpopular on social media. Well, the entire country is not on social media 24/7. So there are a lot of people who are going to see the big Bloomberg ads, and at that last minute, they may jump over to Bloomberg. Does that give him 10 to 100 extra delegates? It's hard to say. I think that surprise be more in the 10 to 20 range, which in the end may not have that big of effect. But Bloomberg may be the one surprise winner. I think Elizabeth Warren has the most pressure right now. If she does not do well in Super Tuesday, she will be the biggest loser. She has to make a push. This is Elizabeth Warren's time. And Pete Buttigieg, like I was talking about, he really just has to keep doing what he's been doing this entire time. And if he can just stay steady and just kind of steadily gain candidates or get up there with Mike Bloomberg, he can stay in this for longer and pretend to be a realistic candidate up to the end.
Let's pivot to the coronavirus, a topic that we have been covering on this podcast for a while, a topic that you have been keeping an eye on. Big update this week on it. Tell me about it, Alexander.
Yeah, so things are not looking good for the coronavirus. I've tried to come with a little bit of positive news every time, and there's just not a lot of positive news. As of this evening, I wrote a really long article on it this morning, and at that time there were 43 countries that had the coronavirus in it. And when I edited it this evening to turn it in, it was at 49 countries, and cases have gone over. It's at 81,404 people have globally been affected. We're at 50,000 active cases as 30,000 people have recovered. Most of those people are in the Hubei province in China where the epicenter is. We're at 2,771 deaths, 2,615 of which are in the Hubei province. Now, we're actually seeing more cases pop up outside of China now than we are seeing pop up inside of China. Because China has been in lockdown for so long, they are seeing the people infected are dropping rapidly in China, and that's a good thing. The stringent measures have worked in China. Granted, they have been very authoritarian in that process. The two countries that are very worrisome right now, well, actually three countries, are Italy has now 438 active cases after a hospital there that I will not try to pronounce admit they mishandled patient zero, which has led to a mass spread infection in Italy that they're trying to quarantine. They're trying to close off cities in North Italy. South Korea, it's actually linked to a religious cult there that had secret meetings in Wuhan and did not tell anybody until now, really. And so there is small community spread that people just thought was the flu, that people thought was the regular cold. And once they start to test and see some more severe cases, because 80% of cases are mild, which means you might have a headache, you might have fever, you might just have regular flu symptoms. Only 20% of cases go to either critical or severe. And that's a good thing, but that also means it's very hard to spot and stop cases from becoming severe. And we'll get to all that in a minute. The country that's doing the worst and may actually be worse off than China in the end is Iran. We have no idea how many cases are actively in Iran right now. They claim there is only, let me find it. There's only about 160 cases in Iran officially. However, we know there is a lot more in Iran right now because one of their parliament members has become infected. Their deputy health minister has become infected with the disease as well. Ayatollah Khamenei, he's been in contact with infected people. So if this is as infectious as it has been everywhere else, he may be infected too. So we're looking at a possible, the real fear I have for Iran is complete loss of government control, the government officials becoming rapidly sick. The city only this evening, Pacific Coast time, the city was, or Iran as a whole started to block off travel between provinces. They have not stopped any social functions. They've very much pretended, unlike even worse than China, that this is not a problem. And the death toll has, according to sources in Iran, the death toll has skyrocketed. Nurses and doctors are dying, and it is in terrible shape. And really, we have no idea how bad in Iran it is, but it's very much bad. Now, the news for the U.S., the CDC announced Tuesday that people should prepare for outbreaks across the United States. And this is a very important thing and a very big update. As for the past 2 weeks, people have not been getting tested. Since I was on with you last time, there have been no tests up until today. And that's because some of the test kits the CDC got from the World Health Organization are actually bad or were bad. Furthermore, there are only 6 cities in the entire United States that can test. So if you might have this disease in a rural area in California or Iowa or the middle of the country, you pretty much have to go to Atlanta or one of the coastal cities to test this, and that takes a lot of time. And I specifically say rural area and North California because that is the first case with no known origin. And why that's important is that the man who's infected in North California, we don't at the time we're recording this on Wednesday evening. We do not know any demographics on this man. We do not even know the city in North California that he lives in. The CDC will contact everybody. They're working on that right now to contact everybody who may have contacted this man. Anyway, he has not been to China. He's had no contact with anybody who has recently traveled to China. That is very, very concerning because that means there is already community outbreak in North California that has gone on uncontrolled, which means many, many more people could be there. Right now, we're seeing an R naught. And what the R naught is, and it's a little bit shaky, so I don't want to linger too much on this. And it really it tells you how many people will be infected by one patient. So right now, the R naught, this comes from actually this morning, Los Alamos Research in New Mexico released a study saying that the R naught is between 4.7 to 6.6, which means every one person will infect 4.7 to 6.6 other people. Now that is reflected by control measures. So for example, the R naught in China started out, there are some ridiculously high estimates, and it really settled around 2.5 to 3 people. It has now dropped to 1.2 people because of the control measures. And really, once you get an R naught of under 1, that is when you see the virus decline and you see it burn itself out. And that's where we want to get you. However, it takes a couple weeks. It can take up to 2 months. So if we have an R naught of 4.7 to 6.6 in North California, especially with how many people travel in that region to work into really along the entirety of the West Coast to Seattle to Portland, we could already be seeing mass community infection in the coming week. I just want to remind everybody that a week ago, South Korea had only about 20 to 50 cases. In less than a week, they have identified over 1,200 cases in South Korea, including a U.S. service member. They're now testing 200,000 people for this. And that's the other problem in the United States that I'm very concerned about the United States, specifically because the White House today did downplay how serious of a risk this is. In addition, the testing capabilities have not proven to be up to par with other nations so far. We are far behind even the UK, who is testing every single patient with the flu will be tested for the coronavirus.
I said from the beginning I was worried about the CDC because I don't think that they have been able to do a good enough job of preventing Americans from getting every one of these very high, contagious diseases, from the swine flu to now the coronavirus. I've always thought that they've had a little bit behind the 8 ball. How much trust do we put in the CDC right now?
Unfortunately, I think we have to put our trust in the CDC because we really don't have another option. Technically speaking, I don't know how much trust we can actually put in the CDC. They are this is very much a reactionary instead of a precautionary at this point. And the reason because of that, it goes back to the testing, that the testing has been far under other countries, including China. And because of that, because testing kits have not been ready, because information has not been readily spread, there's kind of this feeling of American invulnerability to this disease because it has been overseas, because it's been on other continents. We have really not felt like we've been paying attention to it, but we have not felt personally affected. And I really want to stress to anybody who's listening is that very soon we could be detrimentally affected by this. I'm just going to be, because I'm in Seattle, Washington, for those who don't know, I did some research today on the emergency prepared plan for Washington State. The influenza pandemic plan in Washington State has not been updated since March of 2006. That's 14 years old. And just to kind of give an idea of how many hospitals and how much preparedness you're going to need to make is, in 1 week, South Korea has over 1,200 cases. I counted the total beds at some of the major hospitals in the Seattle region, and not isolation units, but just total beds overall, it's only about 1,200. So that means if there's an outbreak in Seattle, like we saw in South Korea, the hospitals would be overwhelmed within a week. That's how fast this can change in the United States, and that's why we have to take very, very serious measures and very precautionary measures. And unfortunately, there's not a whole lot like we can do. There's no magic pill. There's no vaccine. There's no anything you can do that can guarantee you won't get this. Unfortunately, the odds are against are in favor of you contracting the coronavirus. And if you want any good news, I guess, is that if you get it, 80% chance that the case is mild, 90%, 97% chance that you will end up living. But the United States is in a very serious situation if we do not take into consideration everything that has happened around the world. If we do not start rapidly testing people, I'd advise very good hygiene. Please wash your hands over and over again. Please, just take smart practice and probably curtail social functions, major social functions. Within a month, we may see some sporting events starting to get canceled if there is an outbreak specifically. And I know baseball is just starting up. We have spring training in Peoria, Arizona, as well as in Florida. So there's going to be a lot of traveling. The World Baseball Classic, which is going to be in Taiwan and Japan, two countries that actually have current infections going. And that's going to be a lot of international travel. There's very much concern, and I just take precautions, and ultimately you're going to have to make your own decision. But I would be very cautious about social functions moving forward.
You mentioned sports, so we have to shoehorn this in here. They've already said that they're thinking about, if this coronavirus gets any bigger, that the Olympics this summer could be put on hold. What are the chances of that happening? What are the odds of this virus not being under control by, say, August?
So the International Olympic Committee has given Japan till the end of May to control the virus. Now, fortunately, we should be seeing the peak of the virus in May to June. And I know that's a long time. There's a lot of people who are going to be infected in that time. Right now, I would put the odds that the Olympics are going to be canceled. Japan has not been readily hit, but other nations have been. And because it's not only going to be Japan that's going to have to control this, they're going to have to take into considerations that they're having almost every other nation on Earth travel to their country. Other nations that have the coronavirus in them, and that may be bringing it to Japan. And there are a lot of people at the Olympics in very close quarters. That is a breeding ground for a viral outbreak. There have actually been multiple fiction books written about how bioterrorism has occurred at the Olympic Games. It's the perfect spot for a viral outbreak. So I think the odds, just because it's not only Japan that we have to pay attention to, but every other country on Earth, and specifically countries, unfortunately, in Africa and in South Asia, the Middle East, because they have very poor infrastructure, they're going to have a very hard time handling any patients that show up, say, in Ethiopia, Kenya, Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has one case. Afghanistan, which has it has very poor infrastructure right now, already has a case. Iran, unfortunately, has exported a lot of cases because they have not taken precautionary measures. Pakistan has one case. So we're going to start seeing a lot of these poorer countries have mass spread. And unlike the Ebola, unlike the swine flu, where we have seen major countries really stay unaffected. The United States had a few cases. There are a few cases in Europe, but what we're able to see is organizations like Doctors Without Borders really recruit first world doctors to come and give their services to these really devastated countries. Well, right now, those first world doctors are taking care of the mass pandemic and epidemic in their own region. So we're not going to be able to see the large support to these poor countries that do not have the infrastructure, that do not have the training that other countries have. So that is all to say the Olympics are looking very bleak right now, and I hate to say that.
So the survivability of this is at 97%, right? You mentioned that the chances of surviving this are pretty high. So why are we so worried about this virus? Just for the people who haven't been keeping up with it and are just now checking in.
Yeah, so we're really worried about it. Well, of course, because it's a virus that has no vaccine. and it is very, very contagious. Like we were going over, the R naught is 4.7 to 6.6. The recovery time is also particularly frustrating because if it is just a mild case, which means you might have pneumonia, you might have a high fever, you might have a headache. Any of those, the recovery time is 2 to 4 weeks. Now, if you do get a severe case, that usually means you have pneumonia, your lungs are filling with liquid, and you're going to have to be put on supported breathing, otherwise you die. So for the 20% of people, so the more and more people that get infected, the more and more severe cases you have, which means you have more and more deaths. We've already seen more people die from this than we have from SARS in 2003. It's more than tripled already. And so that's really why we're so concerned, is because this is going to really stress the medical system. This is an unknown pathogen that really is very, very contagious. And that's why we're so concerned. It's actually to the point now where it's anybody who says there is hope that it can be contained, but we're like 2 days away from the point of no return. The worst part about this is it could become cold and flu season and coronavirus season, because one of the animals that this is traced to is the pangolin. The pangolin is this scaly, aardvark looking creature that is the most illegally trafficked animal in the world. So each season, each flu season, each cold season, we're going to see cases like this pop up again and again and again until we develop a vaccine. China's already taken measures to curtail the illegal animal trade in their country. They're going to work really, really hard to stop the trade of the pangolin. But that's really why we're so concerned about this, is because there's no treatment for it, and it stresses the medical system. And while the survivability is fairly good, and that 97% is just if you take everybody in a demographic, that's what it is. That changes a lot on your own health as well. If you have a disease, if you have preconditions, diabetes is actually one of the biggest risks for this. We have seen a lot of comorbidity deaths with people who have diabetes too. We have also seen a lot of comorbidities, particularly anybody over 60 is just devastated and has higher chances of dying, pretty much a flip of the coin at that point. So we're seeing the older generation really be devastated by this. Kids have not been as affected, and kind of the 20 to 30 range has not been as affected. A lot of those cases have been mild if they do have it. The other thing that is very concerning about this is the mass infection of doctors. We have seen 3,000 nurses and doctors be infected because of this in Wuhan and Hubei. And just to put that into perspective, that's more than the total number of people that were infected by SARS in Hong Kong. And Hong Kong was one of the areas most infected, most damaged by SARS in 2003. And so that really takes away from the doctors from the capability of treating disease, not only treating regular disease or the coronavirus, but also treating regular disease. Because you got to remember, there are people who are still coming in with the flu. It has been a historically bad season for the flu in the United States. We are seeing measles pop up across the United States. Just this last year, Washington State had a measles epidemic where we had 87 cases before. That's the most since the early 90s, before the disease was declared eradicated from the earth. So there are a lot of other things that are happening. It's not like disease puts itself on hold for everybody to get the coronavirus. Every other condition is still happening. It is highly dangerous for anybody who has any sort of comorbidities. So that's where a lot of the concern is coming from, and that's why you have to take special care if you have any of these pre-existing conditions, which make you immunodepressant, which might lead you to be more vulnerable towards catching an infection.
All right, Alexander, before I let you go, give me a quick China update.
Yeah, so China right now, they're doing better. And that's the good news. We are seeing cases drop to there are only 410 new cases outside of the Hubei province today. Right now, there are more cases popping up outside of China opposed to inside China. Hong Kong, however, is still waiting to get hit. We're seeing more cases pop up there. They just had 9 more cases there, up to 91 cases in total. And we're seeing a lot of community and family outbreaks there tied to a couple of families who had dinner about 2 weeks ago, which fits the incubation period. And most concerning is that in MTR, the MTR is the tram system there. Some of the employees there, some of the police officers who are very in the community a lot, have come down and been diagnosed with the coronavirus in Hong Kong. In China itself, we are still seeing very much businesses will be closed through March, schools will be closed through March, through April, and that is putting the stress on the global supply chain, and that is the reason we have seen the stock market drop 2,100 points over the last 3 days.
Alexander Haynes, every time we talk to him, we get a little bit smarter. Thanks so much for coming on with me.
Hey, thank you very much.
Thank you again to Alexander for coming on the show. Tomorrow, big day, Film Friday. I break down Downhill, Julia Louis-Dreyfus's and Will Ferrell's new movie. Is it a comedy? Is it a rom-com? Is it a drama? Who knows? I break it down for you. Also, we have the baseball gambling. I break down who's going to win the MVP, who do I like to come out winning the divisions, who is smart money, and who is going to lose you a bunch of money. So, all that coming up on Friday. Thank you again for listening to this podcast. Please continue to send all your love and support our way. We need it. Thank you. I'll talk to you again tomorrow.